We're gonna share.
Él está ahí saqueando la oficinita, lo más tranquilo.
Está saqueando. Muy bien. Muy bien.
You're gonna have to teach me that secret, how to.
What's that? What's that?
No.
What happened?
I just set up everything.
I do, mommy. That's right. Everything.
You from New York?
Jersey.
Really? Where in Jersey?
My town is Manawhan.
Okay.
I worked in New York for 6 years in Manhattan.
Manhattan. Nice.
You from up there?
I am.
From where?
United Nations. I was born in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I grew up. Aquí mira, está lleno muy lejos. Ya, está lleno lejos. Y lo tiran para acá. Aquí, entonces. And then, I grew up for a little bit in New Jersey.
What town?
Princeton, and then in Puerto Rico I was like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's why I say United Nations.
Yeah.
Now my biological father, he's from the Bronx, New York.
Yeah.
What part or whatever?
The Boogie Down Bronx.
I know.
That's right. Boogie Down. I like the Bronx. I like the Bronx not to live, but to get in and do some things and coochie frito.
Oh, Dios mío, you guys they're amazing.
Frito.
Yeah.
You know, in the Bronx, for $5, you can make $5 work.
Work.
Not
here, right?
No.
Dios mío. Ahí, mira. Thank you.
All right. We are ready for class. Boom.
There you go. You're truly ready.
Everybody came early. Last time? No, the time before.
Oh, no? No?
We gotta be up by 9.
I'm gonna do like you guys today. Get up.
Pass it, bro. How you doing, man? Good to see you. Hello.
Hey,
How you doing? Good?
It's me.
¿Verdad que no se le conoce? ¿Todo bien? Hola.
Good.
We missed you last the 2 weeks
Bon Jovi,
ago.
that was Bon Jovi.
No.
We had 5 years for that.
Last time.
Absolutely.
Last time we couldn't make it because
We saw
Yeah,
Bon
you told me.
Jovi.
put the Bon Jovi.
We saw that show.
I thought you guys were doing
Yeah.
something important.
That was very important, okay?
No.
That's a one in a
It's
lifetime.
not important. I'm going to tell Rafi.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
I think
5 years I've been waiting for those
Hey.
tickets.
this is so
Yeah.
cute.
5 years.
I would miss it
And then
too.
we bought it, and then it came
Aw.
out 4 months in advance.
Felicidades.
No, we saw that show in New York
Gracias.
in Madison Square Garden last year, like a year ago. Last April.
Yeah.
It's the best. Oh my
Aw.
God,
In the
that's so
seats. We're behind the family.
much fun.
And you forgot about this
We
family.
got the family, you know.
Yeah.
So next, we're trying to go this summer to see, what's our boys in New York going to see, Mommy?
Jay-Z.
No,
Beyonce.
in New York.
Beyonce's here in August.
We got tickets
Yeah,
for
we
that.
got to
You know
go.
what?
What kind of guy, old singer you want to see?
Santo Marido.
Ese sí es santo. Ese sí es
Oh,
santo.
Billy Joe.
Los otros nos abandonaron y me cambiaron a mí a Tony Robbins por
Tony
mí.
Robbins. Y pagando.
Justin Timberlake.
No, ahora sí me le pegó un
This
bello.
Monday, the following. It's
Wow.
That's gonna be good.
It's gonna be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
I heard they do a very big
You have good seats?
Yeah, we got really good seats last minute, which is great.
They make that. They make that.
Yeah, it's gonna be a show, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be
We thought about that, but when I got this, and then Jay-Z with Beyonce, we really want to see that, so let's grab those now.
Porque
I don't know if it's at the Citrus Bowl.
se operó de un
Oh,
ojo.
it's- that's right,
Cuando
that's right.
terminamos de hablar,
Yeah.
se operó de un ojo.
Yeah.
Se operó de un ojo.
And then he got that rainy night. We got him the day before. Every time there's a show, we look for, like Memphis Wrestling, you gotta ask them, and they'll have it.
Cuando
Boom,
esa
let's get
película,
them.
Yeah.
Because I
No me
got,
digas, no me
we
digas.
sit on top.
Yeah.
What?
Nosebleeds.
We'll go on YouTube, and we'll watch it. Oh, no.
y averiguaste que te mandé
como el agua de la pluma.
Same thing with the magic. Your magic, yeah.
El agua
They didn't have it in a while, but
El
I got
agua
a great
de la...
connection.
Hay que esperar como una semana más.
Yo estoy aquí.
Great connection.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
La mejor
And
agua para tomar
only
de la
when-
pluma es por la
when these
mañana.
seats are available in the first 6 rows.
Es por la
Let
mañana.
us know.
¿Cómo está?
And that's what
Es la de
and,
por la,
so
por la mañana.
the restaurant,
Porque
Yeah.
la
the
procesan
food
durante
service,
la
blah,
noche.
blah, blah, you know, so
La
that's
limpian
kind of
y
cool.
todo y por la
Yeah, that's
mañana
kind of
es la
cool.
mejor agua. ¿Y
When I
sabes
worked
quién
at
también me dijo
Mercedes,
eso? Que trabajó
used
en
to
la
get
planta de
sponsored.
agua aquí.
So
Jenny
for
Hernández.
years it didn't happen.
La del coro de Chicago, la
Then it
directora,
gets
ella
a
es
little
química.
jacked up when he says, oh,
Y Jane Hernández me lo dijo también. El agua de la pluma tiene muchos minerales.
it's for the magic, the 4 seats.
See you, do you have clients for
No importa dónde viva.
¿Ah? Por lo menos la de aquí tiene, es buena, tiene muchos minerales.
He don't qualify.
Okay.
Porque
So
la
one
boda
person,
de
you have one
So
person?
I have one family.
Okay,
And
awesome.
I
It's gonna be
was
great. It's gonna be
so
good.
far, yes, but
Yeah.
good.
Es agua
Absolutely.
buena,
And
la
the
agua
other-
aquí es buena.
Yeah.
Eso es
Good.
comercio, pero es buena. Es buena. Y yo me la tomo de la pluma.
¿Sí?
Y tiene el agua precisamente por eso es que aquí las tuberías, el cobre, se lo come el agua, porque tiene muchos minerales. Tiene muchos minerales y se come, por eso se come el cobre. Es que el agua y por la mañana yo lleno los botes y todo, el agua limpiecita y sabe bien y todo.
¿Sí?
Y Jenny Hernández, la directora del coro que trabajó en la planta de agua aquí, que se retiró, que es química, también me lo dijo. Me dijo, eso es bobería, la gente gastando chavos en... No te digo que hay ciertas, pero en ciertos estados, no sé, pero de aquí de la planta del agua es buena. Ella trabajaba en la
That's good to know.
Ay, no tengo la mía.
¿Ah?
Yo trabajaba en la Laucel,
ese es
en Bayamón, en el Colegio de Ventana.
Tony Robbins.
Yo estaba en cinta de mi hija y la otra que se había ido el cinta y no pudo más. Y el Demetrio Laucel, el dueño de la ventana, dijo, esa silla yo la voy a cambiar, porque esa silla tiene algo. Porque todas las cosas que yo me he quedado que tiene el reino más fácil, pero yo me quedo mitad.
Property management. Oye, property
Property management. No, mija, yo me tomo eso y después estoy... Aquel que esté prohibido tomar café después de las 3 de la tarde.
June 14. I'm wishing May.
No le dé café. Yo no tengo café a nadie. Yo no tengo café. Pero te voy a decir café latina que... No, yo no. Dígale a Rafi que Rafi que hace los expresos. Los shots que se le van el cerebro.
¿Qué? Season de mujeres. He visto bien poco varoncitos.
Ese es mi primer café.
Eso ya.
Ellos me van a dar un papel
Ya,
de
ya,
girl, yo
ya.
no como. Me da
Todo el mundo que conozco es having girls.
Taquicardia.
¿Es la primera de ustedes?
No, la segunda. El primero es un varón.
Ok.
So we waited 9 years.
No, Rafi lo
Thank
que
you,
hace una
Rafi.
bomba ahí.
¿Quién te habrá dicho el secreto? Esa asistente tuya.
Ya tú
Esta
sabes.
tarde.
No viene hoy. Está
No.
bregando con el nene que está enfermito otra vez.
Enfermito, ¿verdad? Es chiquitito siempre.
¿Cuál es de Lisa?
El de Lisa.
Ay, bendito. Pues Rafi es el que prepara unos
Señor,
shots ahí de
if I
café,
say
que eso
bendición
es...
to somebody, maybe a couple years older, is it still
Aquel
respectful?
tiene prohibido
Sí.
tomar café antes de
Totalmente.
Pero después él que se baña y se pone como un
Ya.
búcaro. Imagínate con café en el sistema.
Bueno,
Pues no la Tina, es Rafi.
La Rafi.
Es Rafi.
El Rafi.
oye, tengo que empezar hoy con una nota triste, ¿verdad? Yuri y Yanira decidieron cambiarnos esta noche
Maybe they're watching us.
por Tony Robbins. Y
Y Shark Tank.
decidieron pagarle a Tony Robbins 1,000 y pico pesos para aquí esta noche. Así que con tristeza nos da pena eso, ¿verdad?
We're here. Aquí estamos por ellos, Rafi.
No, déjeme, les menciono que tanto Lisa como Mike, Mike está bregando con un cliente que tienen que cerrar mañana y obviamente eso lo va a limitar esta noche. y Lisa está bregando con el nene que está enfermo, así que no van a estar aquí con nosotros esta noche. Sí. Pero esta noche, let me switch to English. Tonight we are joined by again the guys in New York, so they are online already, and we are going to be talking about property management. Let me start by saying that property management is most likely the strongest way of stream of income that you can get on real estate.
In commercial.
In commercial and residential. Okay? Obviously, at the same time, that is the strongest way to get stream of income, meaning monthly income that comes no matter what. It is also the highest number of complaints against real estate agents in the state of Florida,
Liability.
and the second largest in New York.
Florida and then.
Yeah. The reason for that is that a lot of people goes into property management with very good intentions, but very little knowledge of what they are doing. And then they get into trouble, they don't do the things that they need to do, and obviously end up, in many cases, losing their real estate license because they are trying to do property management the wrong way. So I will show you tonight what is the right way to do it, what is the type of fees that you can charge or expect to get for the job. And then I will close with one or two suggestions. One is, if you're going to do property management, get bonded and insured.
For sure.
Okay? Do not do property management without the correct amount of insurance and bonding. Okay? And number two, never, under any circumstances, accept funds to an escrow account. Do not open an escrow account. Legally is the way to do it, but from the point of view of operations, it's a nightmare. I run two escrow accounts for over 12 years, and it cost a fortune. It's very hard to reconcile, not because of the mathematics of reconciliation, but because of the requirements of the board and the licensing division. A typical reconciliation is like a bank statement reconciliation. You deduct all of the checks, add all of the deposits and the charges, and boom, you have a balance. Well, on the case of escrow accounts, you have to report the amounts that are on hold on the escrow in a separate statement. You have to report the amounts that are paid to third-party suppliers in a separate statement reconciled, and then you have to pay everything that is labor or that is related to human payments in a separate account, and then you have to pay workman compensation for those separate and bring it to the statement. So it's a nightmare. It cost me significant amount of money per month for years to do it, until I figured out that you don't have to have an escrow account. What you need to do is to structure your payments and collections from individual accounts from each one of the owners, or for each one of the properties if the property is enough large in terms of volume. And then what you do is you manage that account for the owner, bring the checks and everything, and mail it to the owner, he sign it and give the checks out. Very
So
simple.
simple?
As simple as that. And then you are out of the issues of having to deal with an escrow account,
Liability, sorry.
which has obviously a lot of liabilities. So understanding all of that, let's start the process of talking about property management. On property management, the first thing that you need to understand is that you need to have what is known on the industry as an appointment to manage. In other words, you cannot manage something that you have not been authorized to manage. And in Florida and New York, both states require a signed agreement with specific characteristics to be able to do property management. So, if you are one of the ones that are thinking about doing property management on your own, and by the way, the license allow you, if you are a real estate agent, to do property management, and you don't have to be a broker. Okay? So if you're one of the people that are interested in doing property management, and I encourage everybody to do property management, it's a very good business, you have to have a contract that allows you to do that. Obviously, if you are an agent and work for a broker, you have to run that through your broker because you're going to have to pay your fees or share of commission or whatever. But you are technically allowed to do property management if you are an agent. Okay? Now, obviously the appointment, it's important because it will tell you how you will manage the assets on the contract. And property management is nothing else than asset planning and management. And for the sake of our conversation tonight, I'm going to use one property as an example. I manage a shopping center in Tampa, in Causeway Boulevard in Tampa. I have been managing it for probably 14, 15 years. So I will use that property as an example so you can kind of understand the explanations that I will be giving on a one-to-one basis with the issues and examples that I will going to be using. So again, you need the appointment to be able to manage. You need to do, basically what you will be doing is doing asset planning and management. Asset planning means that you will be managing that asset of the client for the client with the tenants. Again, on the case that I'm using today is a shopping center. Shopping center have several spaces, have a lot of parking, have tenants that are mixed tenants. So as we move through the asset planning and the capital works, you will be looking at specific details that will allow you to understand the different categories that you have within a property and how they work. Capital works means that there are two types of expenditures in property management. One is what they consider capital work, which is work that is done to improve the property. Okay? So, if you paint a building, that is not considered capital work. That is maintenance. But if you improve the property physically, you add square footage, you replace roof, okay? You replace commercial glass windows. All that kind of stuff that goes into the actual asset, that is considered capital work. So capital work is important because when you manage, you have to deal with budgets. And if you don't do your budget correctly with the owner, once you are managing the property and a capital repair or improvement comes and you don't have a budget for it, you will have problems.
That's true.
Yeah, because the owner will say, well, we don't have budget for that. And most likely you need to do that capital improvement because you either need a new client that will go to that space, or you need to do a repair in order to keep a client happy. On this specific shopping center that I'm talking to you about, or that I'm using as an example, the shopping center was built in 1956.
Yeah, right.
It was operated until 1978, and then on 78 they sold it to the second owner, and that second owner basically turned out all of the tenants, which at that point in time were very lousy tenants, and bring in brand new tenants, but repaired the building before that. So on the public record it shows that on 1978 the building was, the capital work was done to the extent of about $380,000 or so dollars, which at that point in time was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So basically they redid the shopping center. They even add some additional spaces to the shopping center. Contractors, unless you are a contractor, which is not the case of any of us. I used to be a contractor and I turned my license off, so none of us are contractors, so you will deal with a contractor to do work. As a matter of fact, when you are a property manager, you don't want to act as a contractor if you are, because there is a conflict of interest there. So one of the things that we want to have to do as property managers is deal with contractors in a specific way. We need to be sure that they are licensed, insured, that they do the work that they are called to do, that we don't pay them ahead of the work because usually they disappear and we will never get them. So contractors is a very large issue on property management. By the way, when we talk about contractors and work to be done on a property, you have to be very much knowledgeable about the lien law in Florida and New York, which are very different in both states. On the case of Florida, the lien law allows you to lien the property if they don't pay you.
As a contractor?
As a contractor, if they don't pay you. So, let me talk to you about the roof repairs that we did 3 years ago at the shopping center that I'm going to be using as an example. The owner of the property select the contractor. He said, Rafi, I want to use Sunshine Roofing as my contractor for that roof. And I say, why? Why don't we go out, get 3 quotes from 3 reputable roofing companies, and well, this is
my
a
cousin.
friend of the family,
It's my cousin.
and I want to be sure that we use them. So, I mean, if it's your plaza, you decide what you want to do. So, I did 2 things which I recommend. I sent a letter to him, an email, saying, as per your instructions,
Sign here, sign here.
as per your instructions, I am
Not liable.
asking Sunshine Roofing, Sunstate Roofing to do the roof on the plaza. It's the only quote that we're getting. I'm asking you to approve it, if you are in agreement with it, and send it back to me, which he did. So, and if you see, I said she did. This is a husband and wife owners, and she's the one that deals with all of these issues. So she answered back saying, yes, let's go ahead and do it. So we use Sunshine State to do the roofing. Sunshine State did a relatively good job. It's a membrane roof. Those are those white roofs that you see around. They are basically in top of the trusses, whether they are metal or concrete. They put foam, they put tar, they put whatever final material they are going to use to give stability, which usually is wood panels. And then they put this white spreadable resin on top, which is what comes out to be a white liner, because it gets really thick. And that the good thing about that white liner is that you can come back to the roof and open a hole on the roof. And after you finish up the repair, you go back and repaint that material over, and it's still what they consider a single membrane. There is no leaks. It's very good type of roofing. Require a lot of maintenance. You have to come back often to retreat the roof, but it's a good type of roofing. The thing is that when the contractor finished the job, we pay him, and a couple of months after that, we receive a lien for materials. The issue was that the contractor purchased the material from a company in Michigan and paid most of it, but left about $5,000 or $6,000 unpaid.
To contractor.
To the not the contractor, but to the supplier of the materials.
So the supplier sent a lien.
The supplier sent a lien towards the property because they can. The law allows you. That's when I tell you that you need to understand the lien law. Okay?
So
And the way that
supplier
works,
can
yeah,
go
the
after your
suppliers,
property.
and if you do a roof in your house,
But the agreement was with the company,
Contractor.
with the
correct,
roofer
but the lien
and
law,
the supplies.
I
you remember that I said that you need to understand the lien law, the lien law?
Mechanical lien, right?
The mechanical lien law,
Mechanical.
the mechanical lien law,
Okay.
or the lien law, which is the way it's correctly addressed, allows you to lien the property if you are the contractor, or if you are a subcontractor of the job or a supplier.
But that has to be proved, because any supplier then can just come back with any lien.
Correct. And what we do in order to solve that, or to remediate that, is that every time I am going to make a payment to
The supplier.
the supplier, I require a total release of lien.
Total release.
And there is a big difference between a partial release, a dated release, and a final release. Okay? The dated release only says, I have been paid up to May 24th or February 15th. The dated release tells you this is a lien waiver up to June 5, and includes everything up to June 5. And then
The partial.
the partial one says we are paid, this is a payment that covers X amount of services. Now, on the partial lien, it says specifically on the wording, and you have to be sure that you use the correct lien waiver, and it has to be notarized. It says that it pays for all materials and work performed during the job.
Wow.
If not, what happens to us on this job will happen. On this case, because she was familiar or was family of the person that owns the company, she accepted a partial release of lien,
Not final.
not final, and they end up paying $5,800 or so to the roofing supplier for something that they have already paid for.
So the contractor washed his hands.
Yeah, it was family, so you know how that's it. So
Ralph, I just had that on a property of ours. We had a lien roofing company, and the roofing company, the same thing, we're trying to sell the house. Until I got that final release from the insurance company, I couldn't sell the house.
correct.
This was just on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have, as a matter of fact, I'm dealing right now. We are selling a house of a client of mine, a commercial client in Waterford Lakes. The roof was part of the inspection issues. After Maria, they require a new roof.
Yeah.
Jasper, which is a very well-known
Yeah.
company here in town,
Yeah,
came in and did the job, very good job, they usually go in and accept direct payment from the insurance company, so we basically pay them the deductible, and that's the end of our responsibility. Well, when we were ready to close, there was still an open lien,
Didn't close it.
and that they didn't close it, plus they haven't had the final inspection. So we have to hold the closing for 3.5 days to be able to
Yeah,
do
but
that
that's
inspection.
like, because somebody didn't push a paper that, but the
Correct.
one that you're saying about supplies, and that's very,
And again, the key about that is first of all, use the correct lien documents. These companies, they know their way around, so they send you automatically the lien waivers. I have, over the last 2 years, and for example, on residential roofing, I use Jasper all the time. I even have a representative assigned to us, Rafael Fernandez. Every time they send us a lien waiver, I go back and send them my lien waiver form and said, hey Rafa, you need to do this one. Oh, okay, no problem. But they try to send you the partial,
With the package,
the partial one,
they always try to send you the partial one.
they put it in the package.
Yeah, it's, and I, don't get me wrong, I don't think that they are trying to, they are being,
they're covering themselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
simple as that, as simple as that.
At the end of
So-
the day,
Again, be sure that you use the correct lien waivers and that you get them notarized.
Oh.
Okay. So now with the expenditures, you have to understand that in any budget there will be things that you correctly budgeted, and then there will be things that just happens. Okay? We have on this location a farming grain seller. It's in a small farm store. Okay? They sell cow, horses, sheep, all that kind of grains by
big amount.
big bags, 50 pounds and so on. But they also sell agricultural equipment and sell water pumps. Okay? Most of the water pumps that they sell for agricultural equipments are 3-phase. So when they came into the shopping center, which was built in 1956, when 3-phase power was very uncommon, was not part of the grid, we didn't have it. So when they came in, we have to, as part of their contract requirements, we have to add 3-phase to the shopping center. Well, that cost us $8,000 because you need to put a lot of electrical equipment in order to be able to bring that 3-phase additional wire to the connector. So expenditures is something that you manage on property management. You have to, it's one of these things that you need to have your own glass ball and look at it and try to get as much information as you can, so when you get that expenditure budget on place, you really get as much as you can ahead of time. Nothing for a client to have more fun with you than having to spend money on his property and not being on the budget that you put together for them to blame you about it and even try you to pay for whatever expenses are. So it's important to be good at expenditures. Now, fees. I will jump the fees presentation to the end because I want to show you actual figures and numbers that will really help you make your mind whether you want to do property management or not. So let's talk about that in a few. Handovers. The reason why I mentioned handover on this is no matter how old or new the property is, no matter whether the owners are Hispanics, which has their own way of doing things, like the owners of this shopping center that I'm using as an example, or they are Anglo, or they are an investment group, or an insurance company, or whatever, you will always have handovers that are peculiar to that property. If you want to do property management, you have to understand that and deal with it. I have, people that have worked with me on the property management portion of the business that keep on saying, why you allow this to happen? And I said, I need to allow this to happen because this is part of the contract and it's the nature of this property and this owner. So, again, understand that property management is a very peculiar business. It's not as square as a real estate transaction where you are acting as a broker or as a salesperson. You know exactly what you need to do and you know exactly what you will get and so on. On property management, you need to understand that flexibility is needed in order to be able to do property management for a long time. Anybody can do 6 months to a year. I have been on that property for 14 years. The reason why I have been there is because I understand what they need, I understand their peculiarities, and I live with those and work with those and make them happen the way they prefer to. Will there be ways to doing it simpler or better or more effective? Yeah. But it's part of the nature of this client. They are from the Dominican Republic. They have their own set of rules. What can I do,
What do you mean by handovers? Like, give us an example.
For example, no, but let me mention one that is very real. This couple, 7 years into me managing the property, decide that they want to go through a divorce. And the property brings 100% of their income.
Wow. They're fighting.
So they drag me, which is a handover, to the divorce court.
Oh my God.
And now I have a court order from the divorce church where I am the one that submit the yearly statements and pay them accordingly. And they have to do certain things in order for me to pay them.
You're the negotiator.
Yeah, the other day I were on my way from Tampa, where they are early doing something, checking on the property, something and so on. And I were on my way to Orlando, 45 minutes on the phone with her, crying and telling me how
bad
her ex-husband was and so on. So, it's part of the nature of and you will say, well, that's one case. No, I have we manage a property in New York that the owner is a Jewish doctor on his late 80s, Dr. Pratt. He's on his 70, 72, 73 years old. And he still practices medicine. You cannot believe the things that I need to do to get that guy what he needs and what he wants. He pays very well. None of these cases I do for less than 15% management fee every month. So they pay good money. But believe me, I sometimes I have to go to the airport early in the morning, get into a plane because he wants to see me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
What? Wow.
And he doesn't tell me what he wants or what he needs or if I need to go prepare with something. He
You
wants
have
to
to
have
be there.
what he calls a face-to-face meeting with his property manager.
Oh my God.
Sometimes it's not worth the $400 or $500 of flying there. But that's the nature of that business. I bill it to him, so he's paying for it. But what I'm telling you is the handover is the peculiarities that they are handed to you.
He doesn't believe in FaceTime.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even have an iPhone. He still have a flip phone. So anyway,
You should invest 1 hour.
I have offered him to give him a phone. Income. Income is key on any property management process. Okay? That's what it's all about. If you, by the way, G-Word has a some kind of property management set up. No, that's what
We had.
what you do is residential property management.
Yes, but we're dissolving that part.
Okay.
It's a lot of headache.
Yeah, it is. And more than anything else, if you don't have a good team to do it, it's
It's a headache.
something else. Anyway, the issue is that income, what will make you different than the rest of the property managers is how you handle income. And let me explain you what I'm talking about. In Orlando, there is predominantly one main company that do most of the small commercial real estate. The name of that company is Bywater. You must have seen signs of them around. They have been in business since 1985 or 86.
For property management?
Yeah, Brian Bywater is the owner of the property, of the company. They, as a matter of fact, they manage this building where we are.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Brian, he has Clark and another guy there that do all of the client services and so on. The success that Bywater have on the market is that Bywater have been very, very effective on improving income conditions on their properties. And let me give you a typical example. Okay? Let's go back to my shopping center in Tampa. I have 49,862 square feet of space, rentable space in that shopping center. Okay? We have a supermarket which is about 13,000 square feet. Then we have a restaurant which is about 3,000, and the rest are spaces that range from 1,500 to 3,000 square feet. Last year, and obviously we have the parking, plus we have some land that was never built on because it was the lot was larger than what they really originally need for the shopping center. So last year, understanding that they were in need of additional income because of the divorce and all of these issues, what I did is I talked to one of my tenants, which is Family Dollar stores. They were on a 6,000 square foot space, which was 3,000 square foot together. They were paying very low rent because General Dollar and Family Dollar are very good on negotiating leases on a long run. They have been on the property for 15 years now. So they were interested in getting additional space than the 6,000 square foot that they have. They were really looking for another 6,000 to make the store a 12,000 square foot store. So what I did, I talked to my engineer, designed a 15,000 square foot building on that area that has not been built on the property, put together a contract with them at today's prices to build that facility for them. We end up building the 15,000 square foot, moving Family Dollar to that freestanding building, and then I turn around and divide the 6,000 square foot that they were using into 4 spaces and re-rent it at full rental space, bringing the income of the plaza from 1 month to another, when we set up the clients on that space, another $189,000 a year.
Wow.
That's what I talked to you about income. It's very important that you have the ability of developing and looking at alternatives all the time for the clients. Things that I have done in that plaza. For example, I rent Causeway is a kind of a combination of a rural or semi-rural and residential area. So what we did is we put in a non-human attended ice machine. That is a 10-foot by 18-foot trailer that produces ice that construction people and so on come in and buy the bags for $2. Okay, we put that in. That pays $12,000 a year. And it takes, okay. So the issue is that if we don't get that, I mean, it's killing only one parking space, but it's producing $12,000 a year of income.
How do you become that creative?
You start understanding all of these processes as you do it and as you get experience. Again, for example, we
In my case would be, I need a new car.
No, you develop that skill.
I need a new car.
You acquire, what I call it, you acquire the skills as you go. For example, on this plaza, and I will see if I can bring up the aerial photo of the plaza. We also have there a car wash now on the parking.
Then you'll be calling all your other property management, let's put a car wash.
In addition to that, because of the setup of the property, now we have 3 food trucks in different places. So again, and all of these people are paying rent.
And you manage that.
Obviously.
The couple is the owner of the whole entire building?
The what?
The couple, oh no.
Oh, they own the whole plaza. So everything is done through contracts. So the food trucks has contracts, the ice machine has contracts, the car wash has contracts. So, all of that brings, oh, by the way, we put in a propane gas dispenser.
So is that more complicated due to the?
No, they are not. Once you get the permits, it's nothing that anybody else can do. So the thing is that you try to raise the income as much as you can. One of the ways of doing that is by helping the landlord understand the dynamics of the plaza. It's not the same if you are a plaza like where you are, or the one that is behind you in the middle of the city on a well-developed area where you have limitations of what you can do and you cannot do. But if you are in a rural area like this one or semi-rural, you have a lot of you have a lot of things that you can help the owner develop, the landlord to develop, that will bring extra money and that will not cost you really nothing to bring into the table.
The next thing you can do is a fresh market on Saturdays.
Yeah. Again, we have to think about that. As a matter of fact, we have a portion of the property that is green at this point in time, and we are talking about doing, and we even put a request to the city for a pre-application meeting where we will be doing some walkways and so on, and have space for a flea market or fresh market during weekends. I mean, it won't affect at all the property, and it will be an additional stream of income.
Actually, the same contract that you use for for the locals is the same contract that you use for the venta ambulante?
No. We have, and hold to that question, I will explain to you in a couple of seconds. But when we talk about leases, we have developed obviously contracts that we use standard, which are what we call triple net leases. Do everybody knows what a triple net lease is? It's a lease that covers all of the expenses. You pay rent plus you pay taxes, property insurance, and management and expenses. So if your rent is $12,000 a year, you pay $12,000 plus what they call common area maintenance. CAM is the way usually it goes. The CAM is the common area maintenance, which includes those three expenses: property taxes,
Taxes?
property insurance, and management and operational expenses.
Yeah.
If you need to cut the grass, that's part of the CAM. If you need to, oh, by the way, the lighting of the common area, that's CAM. So basically, for the owner, income is net. The only thing that he will deduct from that income is the mortgage.
Where does the term triple net come from?
The triple net is a legal term used to describe a specific type of real estate contract of lease.
Okay.
And they call it triple net because in essence, by paying those three expenses, what you get is a net lease.
Okay.
Whatever the rent is what they are paying you directly for the property. So that's why the only thing that you have to deduct is the mortgage.
For the maintenance.
For example, on the case of the building that we are planning to do for YouWord, all of the contracts will be triple net contracts, restaurant and everybody else. Because the net rent that will come to the building, to the owners, is the full rent, not the expenses that are covered to the county. But then you have to have in mind that you have to use the correct lease agreement, and that's when it comes your question. You cannot charge to a food truck can, because it's what they call a modified tenant. Okay? Modified because they are not tied to the floor. It's the only description. But what happens is that you have to have obviously the correct contracts and know which contracts you are going to use for each one of those type of tenants, so you get the correct result out of it. And let me give you the typical example. For example, you remember that I told you that we have a car wash? Okay. In Florida, St. John Water Management District, which is the one that covers all Central Florida, requires that every single car wash that you have in operation reprocess and recapture all of the water that they use for washing the cars. Which means that if you put in 25 gallons of water per wash, you need to reclaim 25 gallons some way and put it back into the system.
Like recycle it.
Okay? But then it gets more complicated, because if it's a car wash and you are using non-biological products, if you are using, for example, regular soap and wax, liquid wax, which is what most of the car wash use, in addition to reclaim the water, you need to process that water before you reclaim it. Okay? So then, what I did is I basically talked to my lawyer and developed a contract, because I didn't want to go into the process of having to deal with St. John Water Management for that purpose. It's a mess. You require inspection to use chemical products on the facility. And what they do is they do what we call a clear or biological wash system. Use less water.
Chemical free.
And it's chemical free.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that way we don't have to go through those processes, and then again, the income of that client becomes significant. And I show you when we look at the picture. Anyway, so you have to be sure that you use the correct contracts. If any of you decide to do property management and you get to a point that you need a contract, please call me. Don't hesitate. I can help you with that so you don't make that kind of mistakes. Maintenance. Key on the property management business. Okay? There are two ways of doing maintenance. You can contract all of the maintenance out, which means that you will have subcontractors. If you are doing residential and you have a pool company that will go in and do the pool. Or you have your own pool people on the company. If you are large enough that you will, you get your handyman and train him on everything and get him licensed on everything, and then you do it on your own. Those are the two ways of doing it. After many years of doing this, I use subcontractors. There used to be a time where I used to have a guy that was fantastic on all of these things, and used to have a pickup for him with all of the equipment, and he went out every morning and did the maintenance, did the reports, everything was great. As we keep on growing and adding properties and cities and so on, and I only do property management on the Central Florida area. I don't do South, I don't do North, I don't even do places like, for example, Daytona Beach. I stay from Deltona down to Kissimmee and Tampa to Titusville. And even though it's very restricted, I prefer to use subcontractors. Gives you a lot more. Obviously, I'm sure that they are licensed and insured, and I ask for the proof of insurance and everything else. But it works a lot better, at least for me, unless you have, for example, if you do residential and you have 150 units, then you have to have somebody on staff, because the amount of emergencies are so large that you need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have to mention that residential management is a nightmare. I only do residential management to clients that owns commercial properties, which I manage, and then by default I have to take care of the residential properties. I think that I only do about 8 or 9 residential properties, and usually I receive more calls from those than what I receive from the commercial properties.
Oh, wow.
That's true.
So, anyway, if you're going to do property management, you need to use a property management software. It's too complicated. I put together a small application for property management a couple of years ago. I used it for about 2 years and end up trashing it and using an already existing one. I will show you later the 3 best ones on the market and tell you why. Obviously, the property is what it's all about. When you look at property management, you need to be sure that you can live with that property. In Manhattan, and the guy there will know what I'm talking about, we have a client that owns several apartment buildings. Very good client, excellent client. But he owns buildings all over Manhattan Island, from 3rd Avenue and Houston all the way to 248th Street on Upper Manhattan, east and west. 640 something buildings. Some of those buildings are in areas that not only you don't want to go, but you don't want your employees to be there. because of the liabilities and the problems. So, I mean, I don't do those buildings for him. I cannot handle that with my type of operation. I handle the sale of the properties, which is different. But you have to understand that you need to understand the property and be able to do the work in order to do property management. There are things that really you cannot do, no matter what the situation is. Tenant mix is extremely important on real estate property management. The tenant mix gives you what I call peace of mind on the rental process. If you have the right tenant mix, you can make a property more effective, more easier to manage, and more profitable. And let me tell you what tenant mix is. Let me go back to the shopping center. I have in that shopping center 2 or 3 key tenants. One is a supermarket, a chain supermarket. It's not a mom and pop operation. That gives you stability and bring you traffic to the plaza. That is a predominantly Hispanic and Black neighborhood in Tampa. So it's a Bravo supermarket, which is a Hispanic supermarket. In addition to that, I have the Family Dollar, again, good for the low-income market. We have the feed store, because there is a lot of nearby agricultural and 5-acre things that have chickens and rabbits and all kind of stuff, horses, all that type of thing. So it's important that you have a good mix on the shopping center, or on the client, or on the tenant, so you have the ability of not losing all of them at the same time when things go wrong in that industry. For example, this building used to be 85% occupied by 2 companies. The company that Manny used to work with years ago, System House, which was a computer company. When Ross Perot sold that company, they lost 54% of the space in this building. You know how many years it was empty?
Yeah, years. More than.
Over 8 to 10 years,
This flat?
this building.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, the original owners lose the business, and the lawyer bought it at their cheap price because of not having the correct tenant mix on place.
And la competencia between
Oh, yeah.
businesses,
Yeah.
the same business. If you have the dollar store
Well,
here,
that's what I'm going to talk about right now. Tenant mix. After tenant mix is, you remember that I told you that we have a Bravo supermarket and a restaurant, a Hispanic restaurant. Well, there is a plaza about a block from this plaza. Last year, they lost a couple of tenants, and I know that there were people looking for space for another Hispanic restaurant. So what I did is I talked to them and I said, listen, you have empty spaces. I don't have empty spaces. I will send you clients. You don't have to pay me a commission. But we need to have an agreement that if somebody came in for a Hispanic restaurant, you will not put it in. He said, well, but what guarantee I have that I will get tenants? And I said, if I don't get you 2 or 3 tenants, you do whatever you want to do. And obviously, in 3 months, I got them two tenants, and then another one in another month that went in and filled out the space. But then my Hispanic restaurant is still doing about $8,000 every lunchtime, because it's the only Hispanic restaurant in a radius of about 3.5 miles.
We didn't want a competition.
Correct. And it's important that you know your neighboring properties so you can negotiate that type of deal with them and help them. Because remember that if you have a client that you cannot accommodate in your plaza, and you take that client and take it to them and get In some cases, you can get a commission, but at least you get it to them and you do the favor. You establish a relationship that at some point in time will come back to you
Yeah.
in goodwill in some way there. So it's important to be sure that you deal with the tenants in a very specific way. The other thing that you need to do is deal with vacancy management. Vacancy management is an art, okay? Every time you have a property that a tenant that move out of the property, I call the newspaper, the local papers. I talk to the radio stations. I get new signs to the property. And I get people excited about what is happening. In other words, I tell the market, hey, our plaza is growing, we have an additional space. This space will be available for very little time. Rates are fantastic, and I make it a positive thing instead of saying, oh, we have an empty space. You won't believe how the market react to that. They come to you with requests that otherwise you will never get, because they see it as an opportunity instead of an opportunity to get into a good space instead of an empty space on a plaza.
Wow.
So it's important that you do vacancy management effectively, and there are many ways to handle vacancy management. But I guarantee you something. If you understand your market, and one thing that I do is every couple of months I get into a car and I drive the area where my properties are, where the properties that I manage are, and I see what is happening. I register on the county for all of the public hearings, so I know what is happening. I know what is coming. Okay? How did were able to put together that deal with the 15,000 square foot building for Family Dollar? Because Family Dollar went behind my back and put a pre-application meeting to find out if they could put in a store about 2 blocks from where I work. So I went in, I sit on the public hearing, on the pre-application meeting, and I heard what their plans were. They want 15,000 square foot near this intersection. So what I did, I create that opportunity for them and turn it around. One of my largest clients in Florida, in Orlando, I got it that way. I went on a public hearing. I heard what they were trying to do. I said, I can do that for them on this and this property. Turn around, look at it. For the last 9 or 10 years, I have been doing all of their business. So again, tenant management is important. You need to be proactive in that process so you can get out of it. Now, talking about the appointment management, it's extremely important that you define those 12 or 13 things that I talked to you about very well defined on the document that you service, which is what I gave you copies of this. Okay? And again, this is a registered trade document, but if you need it, I'll give you rights for it. These documents include everything you need to provide to a property management company or to a property management client that will, when they read it, will say, nobody has talked to me about that in other property management proposals. There are many things in this document that property management companies don't even have on their listings and are really important and significant. Now, in addition to being able to define the duties effectively, you need to be very clear about fees. No owner or landlord of a property will pay you anything that you don't have pre-approved on the set. They will always have the most creative reasons not to pay you something. you need to be sure that you have very clearly defined fees on your appointment contract. And finally, you need to deal with the legal forms. Do not cut corner on legal forms. If you are going to do property management and you don't know what to use, call me. I will tell you what they are. I will give you samples, and I will give you phone numbers to lawyers that can help you narrow down that form to whatever you need. Okay? As I told you at the beginning, asset planning is the key to doing property management. Part of the process of getting asset planning in place is deal with the correct type of anchors. Okay? Most of you drive often by the airport area of Semoran Boulevard, which have been there forever. Semoran Boulevard is one of the oldest roads here in town. If you drive between 408 and Carryford Road, you have a pocket on 436 that is high on criminality, the lowest in rents, and believe it or not, every time they have a space empty there, it takes forever to get it filled back. Okay? If you get the right type of anchor tenants, you will never have that problem. Okay? Let me tell you how that happens in Semoran. They used to have a Winn-Dixie shopping center or store right there on Union Park, which is the name of that section of 436. While the Winn-Dixie was there, it was fine and dandy.
Until they close.
Then the shopping plaza didn't want to do any renovations, and they lost the tenant. And they brought back Las Americas store,
Grocery.
American Grocery, which was owned by Cesar Ramirez, a Dominican guy that owned shopping centers around or Hispanic stores around. It was a mess. He cut all of the corners that you can cut. And obviously immediately after he opened the store,
All the tenants left.
all of the other tenants left, and then you have Juancho cellular store, obviously with Hispanic music and salsa and all around on speakers outside the store. They have a Hispanic bar, they have a gay bar, they have something else there that was a mess. And little by little, the good tenants that were there start leaving because what was coming in was trash. And that's what I talk about doing anchors and the correct type of tenants. You kill a property, you damage, he's the controller. You damage the property by bringing poor quality tenants to the mix. And unfortunately, the owners, the landlords, are the ones that typically push that because they want the space to be rented immediately. So if somebody came in that is not a good tenant, oh no, take it because we're going to be collecting rent. Yeah, but that will bring you back additional empty space in the near future and will mess up your property. Quality of a property is something that you cannot negotiate.
It has to do with the walk-in traffic too.
Yes, yes.
If you don't feel safe, you will never.
And you all have heard about gentrification. It's a very common term in real estate. Gentrification occurs or happens through several ways. One is obviously the change of population, demographics, but also it's a change of service area. Okay? If you by means of the type of tenants that you have, you push your people or the people around you, your clientele, to have to go to other areas. You are filling that emptiness or gap that you have by bringing people from other areas to come to you. And you have to be sure that you do that with the correct tenants. Now, capital expenditures, as we talk about, will make a big difference because people are used to go and they like to go to nice places. That's why you see most of the good plazas having renovation every 7 to 10 years. Have you all seen what is happening with Colonial Mall? Colonial Mall was dying on the vine. I mean, you go to the which is on Highway 50, the old Colonial Plaza, which was a big, yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's Fashion Square Mall. It's
It
what
was
used to be Colonial
dying
Plaza.
for like.
It was dying to
Like
the point that you go
7 years, 9
to the
Aisle.
food area, and it was empty all the time. All of the restaurants were closed. I mean, it was a mess. They are redoing the whole plaza, and they are bringing a completely different tenant mix than what they used to have. Okay, see how many times they have redefined and remade Florida Mall.
That's another question that me and Jeremy always talking about. That corner that is such an amazing tourist area, and it seems like that property is like janked or something. What is
Festival Bay.
Festival Bay? What it was?
Yes, there you
That
have it.
never went nowhere.
And they have tried to keep it that way, and it won't work.
And it's a better position than
Oh.
Millennium Mall and the Florida Mall.
Yes, it is.
And around it is blooming
Yeah,
with
but
Brazilian.
again, they are not doing it. They are not doing what needs to be done, which is redo the property. They need to change it.
I mean, it was new since they opened it. The mall have never been open like 80%.
Yeah.
Like 10%, 20.
Yeah.
I guess
And-
the wrong time.
And again, capital expenditures talked a lot about what you need to do to keep a property not only being good, but continue to grow economically and profitably for the owners in an effective way. So, see that we call it capital expenditure, but it's really not an expenditure. It's an investment. The reason why we have to call it expenditure is because it's fully deductible from the tax point of view. And you don't have to do the 28.5 years depreciation. In today's tax market, you can do changes, capital expenditure to a property, as long as they don't represent more than 50% of the total value of the property, and still deduct it on the year that you do it.
Awesome. It's an investment.
So it's an investment. Now, on the expenditure line, which are really expenditures, the reason why I mention it here on the asset planning is in New York, okay? Back on 93, we have the largest real estate property on the city, totally unattended from the security point of view. The name of that property was the Twin Towers. What happened? We have the 93 bomb that closed the tower, the south tower, the north tower, closed it for 6.5 months while they did the repairs. That was the first time that they had the bomb there. That single act of terrorism changed completely the way properties are managed in terms of expenditure for security in New York. I remember that at that point in time, my office was on the Empire State Building, on the 38th floor. I used to go in walk to the lobby, get to the elevator, and go there in 5 minutes. From that day on, which is why I'm not in the Empire State Building anymore, it takes me 22 to 25 minutes to go up my office, because I have to go through security, magnetometers, all that kind of stuff in order to be able to go in. Same thing happened on the Twin Towers at that point in time. Security was something else. That's what they had to get a plane into each one of the towers to be able to damage it. So again, expenditures are strange things, because it's not what it costs to do, it's what you need to do with the property. A typical example here in Florida is if you don't have a good alarm system on most of the properties that handle cash, you are getting into trouble without having to. And the liability can spill to the owners of the property if they don't do or require the correct type of alarm system. So again, on expenditure, you have to understand that there are things that have to do with the market and what is happening, more than simply thinking about what the expenses are. In the case of New York, now security represents in most of the buildings the single largest expense that they have. Not only in human expenses, in payroll, but in equipment that they need to have.
Wow.
And income, again, keep on being the asset planning process of more importance in the whole process. Again, being able to narrow down income in ways that are very much creative will allow you to do the difference between being able for them to pay you correctly and to keep the property and not doing it. So you have to understand that income is very, very vital for that process. And the leases, again, if you don't deal with the leases correctly, you will lose money and you will lower the value of your property. And you will say, why? Very simple. The way that appraisals work today on commercial properties is that they assign more value to what they call the portfolio of income, which is the leases, than what they assign to reconstruction value and to market value. Why? Different than in residential, because you can have a very good property in very good shape, and if the tenants that you have and the contracts that you have do not bring the correct amount of money, the value will be significantly hindered in that process.
So it affects the value of the property.
Look at this. I have a client that owns a property on Golden Brook Road, right in front of what used to be Assemblies of God Church. The property, it's a tiny building. It used to be years ago a 7-Eleven building. As a matter of fact, if they were going to build it today, we will not be able to build it there, because when they spanned Golden Road, they took frontage, and when they expand Golden Road, they also took part of the side of the property to do a common area retention fund. So if I were trying to build it today, I won't be able to build it. But because the tenant pay $4,500 a month rent in that small tiny building, that property is worth about $900,000. So again, it's all based on how good your leases are. Tricks that I use to make the correct amount of income on a property and to keep the values of the property. You come in and said, hey, I want to rent a space for you. And it's 1,000 square foot and I'm eager to pay $12 per square. I said, well, market rate is $12. So I will consider your offer, but let me tell you what I will do. I will make a contract for $15 per square. And if you pay me on the 5th of every month or before, I will discount your rent to $12.
So the lease shows 15.
You know what I did there?
Raise the market
The
value.
lease will show
15.
$15.
So you already raised the area amount.
You raise the property significantly there. And by doing it triple net, it's even better, because then the whole 15,000 will be considered net income.
Well, you will put in the lease that is $12, 15?
No,
So how can I trust
do it
you?
in an addendum.
Another thing, there's the triple net, the gross net, and the full service net. Why the difference? The best
Well,
one is the
it-
triple net?
The triple net is the legal term. The gross lease,
Lease, yeah.
the gross lease is what they call the lease that the amount of rent is gross.
Not deducting all the others.
So they are not deducting anything, which in essence is a triple net lease.
Mhm.
Although the way they use gross lease is because some people do not require the tenant to pay for either expenses or insurance, because they have some other kind of arrangement for that. For example, I have a property where I don't have to have insurance because it's already provided by the homeowner by the home owners association, and also do not have maintenance because they do it on their management fee. So I don't need to have that. So in essence, it's not a triple net lease, but it's a gross lease. So that's the difference between
And the full service?
The full service is that they give everything to you, even utilities.
Who does, the landlord?
The landlord.
But it's no net, so whenever they're gonna do it, I mean, it's not the net.
And let me tell you what happened with the full service leases, which are very uncommon at this point in time. In New York, you see it a lot because of the conditions of the properties. In New York, you have a lot of properties that have multi-tenants, because the buildings are typically large, and the buildings are old, so they don't have individual meters, or they don't have individual bathrooms and so on. So what they do is they basically give you a rent per square footage based on market, and then they service everything
Include that a
in
little
that.
bit. I guess
that fee.
here we apply more to the executive offices, those small
Correct.
tiny offices,
Correct.
because it's a
What they call common offices,
common
which is
offices.
you rent a cubicle,
Mhm.
and then, which in essence is what this building is. The bathrooms are outside there, they are not on each one of the suites. The parking is common, the lobby is common, so the only thing that I pay for is my square footage. So instead of paying for, I have here, I believe it's 1,300 or 1,400, but I pay for about 1,700 because that's what they call the core.
Yeah.
C-O-R-E. The core is what they add based on the total common
Amount that
area,
you're using.
based on the uses that you have per square footage. So
Yeah.
that's what they. Again, there are many names for the same thing, but what you need to be aware
They're
is that.
labeling it different, but it
Correct.
depends.
But what you need to be aware is that you have to be sure that you use the correct term for what you are doing. Is the key thing there.
Relocation.
Relocations. For example, what I did with the family store. I pay some expenses of the relocation just to get them moved to the new store.
Did you honor the same rate that they were having?
No, we
Because they were
renegotiated.
willing to move
Yeah,
somewhere else.
but it was a lot more space. It was
And newer.
15,000. It was a new space. It has
All
specific
standalone.
things that they were in need of. It has a loading and unloading dockside facility on the
So
back.
you raised their price.
Yes.
You created
Yeah,
heck
we
of an
went
opportunity.
from $650 per square on the plaza, which is a lot more expensive, to a metal building on the side at $1,550. And they were happy about it. Because it was a brand new building, they have all of the things that they need. And by the way, after we financed that building, because again, the divorced couple didn't want to put a penny on that, we financed 100% of the construction, because the land was free and clear. The debt ratio against the new rent roll was like 32%. So we calculate that in 4.5 years they are going to clean the debt on that building, and 100% of the rent will be for them.
What's the typical amount of years you try to go for, negotiate, the minimum?
Well, the market and the accountants prefer to do 10 to 15. I usually try to move on the 5 to 7. Not always is possible, but I try to.
Why do you do that?
Because of my training, I am very much against anything that is financed. I own like 13 or 14 properties, and I have one mortgage on one property, and that's all. I hate to finance. I remember that back on the 90s I was heavily involved in real estate, and I lost a lot of money on the savings and loans, which most of you were not even born. Savings and loan debacle on the 90s, and I were heavily financed like any other stupid person in that at that time. You know, if they loan it to me, I take it. I were not worried about it. I was young. I thought that I knew everything.
I want to be like you now.
So
When you grow up,
so what I did is I basically I have everything on loans at that point in time. I think that at that point in time, back on the 90s, I have about $3.5 million in property, and I have $3.2 million on debt. So, by the way, at 14 and 15%, 1990.
That's
So
high.
I lost so much money at that point in time that I decided that I will not use credit as people use it. That doesn't mean that I don't use credit. I use it very, very infrequently and under my terms. If not, I don't buy it. As simple as that. So again, with renovations, you have to understand that renovations is something that you need to do to improve income, not to do renovations. Okay? I think that I mentioned to you, one of the most profitable properties that I have for many years was a raggedy old apartment building that I used to own in South Street in downtown Orlando. You know South Street in downtown Orlando?
Yeah. They're very raggedy.
The building that I used to own was a building built in 1946. Was a 2-story, 12 apartment building. All of the tenants paid cash.
Wow.
There were no contracts. I have to go to collect rents between 9 and 3, because after 3 I wouldn't
You have to
even
take
bother to go to
you have to take a gun.
even at that time, yeah.
Even at that time, you have to go.
Yeah, and I always go with somebody.
You go with a taxi. You will not drive.
But that property, I bought it for $114,000 on an auction,
Wow.
and I used to collect every month $8,600.
Very nice.
I owned it for 14 years until they took it away because they
Needed to expand.
need to expand and they were happy to get rid of that monster. By the way, they paid me for the property $444,000, and I paid $114,000.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, the issue is that I never put a penny on maintenance or repairs on that property. And you will say, why? Well, for example, I hired a guy here from Castleberry to do the pest control, because one day I went in and I saw roaches all around the place. So the guy came in, and 2 months later he came back and said, Rafi, thank you for your business, but I won't charge you anymore. I'm not going there anymore. I said, why, you have problems? He said, no, you have been nice with me and so on, but you don't have a pest problem. I said, yeah, I do have a pest problem. She said, no, you have a behavior problem.
Those the people that are not clean.
The people that are there, they come out to eat on the food
Outside.
aisles. They come in with food, they eat, they left things go to the floor, they left the plates there, and no matter how many times I do the pest control process, you will have roaches. There's no way that you can do anything.
It was honest.
So with time I figured out that the only thing that I need to do on that property was
Change tenants.
not even that, because for example, I have, of the 12 apartments, 6 or 7 of them were occupied by the same people, but I have the building. And even one of them, a lady, Mercedes was her name, a lady from Jamaica, the county have to actually move her out of the property, because the day that they were ready to demolish, she was still there on the apartment.
She was emotionally attached.
I don't know if I can call that emotionally attached, but she was there. Okay? So, what I mean with that is, there are properties that you don't need to do anything about it. Because at the point in time that you do it, you are creating a problem. One time, I remember that the buildings were green and white. And I said one day, I talked to several of the Mercedes and some of the other tenants, I said, would you mind if I paint it into a darker color, like a beige or brown, so it looks cleaner? He said, no. So, 14 years and I never paint the property.
Oh my God.
The only thing that I
need to spend money.
the only thing that I did, a couple of the kitchens, they burned them, so I ended up putting new cabinets, and then I ended up putting. Did any of you remember Builder Square?
Yeah.
Because there was no Home Depot or anything like that. I went to Builder Square and bought cabinets from Builder Square and put it in, because.
Doesn't matter. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
So again, depending on the property, you have to decide whether you will do renovations or not. They are not driven by schedule, they are driven by need. So it's important to have that in mind.
Wow.
Specialty tenants. This is very important. You will be amazed on how many specialty tenants you can get into a property that will make a difference in your property and in your property mix. You remember that food store that I have in the Tampa Plaza? Is the highest per square footage seller on that plaza.
This is the only one around.
Because it's the only one around. And you know how much it cost me to do their improvements? Less than $1,000. Because everything is very rough. It says feed store. So again, specialty tenants is something that you need to have in mind when you are doing your asset planning. And also the tenant mix is important. I used to have a laundry on that location. And every month was a problem getting the rent from the laundry. It was a Chinese lady. And And I tried to figure out why she was not paying. And I remember that I keep on going to the store and seeing very little clothes on the racks. And one day I talked to her, I said, can you talk to me about your business? How much you do? What kind of clients you have? 10 minutes later, I figured out that the problem was that there was not a location for laundry. Blue-collar workers, there was no need for suits or anything like that, which is where you do one business on it. You know what I end up doing? Buy out. I told her, let me give you $5,000 and I buy your equipments, and I did. I sold the equipments for about $9,000 and end up putting another store there that is doing very good business.
So why not move her?
Huh?
Why not move her instead?
She didn't have enough income.
Because I didn't have another space in another plaza that she can do money, and it was not in that plaza. It's not where she was on the plaza. It was the area that was not good.
She was barely making it.
So, and believe me, there are people that are in business because they need to, not because they should be. And that's why many of them spend their lives working and end up with nothing because the business where they are is not good. It's not doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
So, it's something that you need to have in mind. And vacancy marketing. I mentioned some of these earlier. You need to make an issue of the vacancies a positive issue, not a negative issue. A vacancy is not something bad. A vacancy is an opportunity to bring a better client, a better service, a better opportunity to that space. Whether it's a plaza, whether it's an office, whether it's, whatever. When I moved to this building a year and a half or so ago, they were 44% leased. Myself, over the last year, I have brought in another 28% leasing to this company, to this building. Now the engineer that I use is in the 3rd floor. The surveying company is in the 2nd floor. The title company that I use is on the 2nd floor. So again, you bring people that will help the other tenants and makes a difference. So, and I get commissions on all of that. So it's important to get that as a property manager. Now, let's talk about fees. Okay? Property management fees range from 6% to 15%. Average commercial property management is on the range of 10 to 12%. If you go to buy water right now, which is the company that I told you that do most of the commercial in the area, they won't do anything for less than 10%. Okay? I tend to be on the high end of the market for my property management. I'm usually on the 12 to 15%. But I give them the value of the difference way over. Again, I am more of a quality of tenants or properties and income type of person than volume. I have issues with volume. It's my personality. But you can conservatively think about 10% as a very reasonable rule of thumb for property management. Which let me jot some numbers for you. Okay? Let's say that you come to this building and talk to Corsac, the lawyer that owns it, and offer him to do the property management on this building for 8%. He's paying now 10%. Okay? Last time I see the rent roll, which they still have about 11% vacancies, they were collecting on monthly rents about $44,000. Okay? That is $4,400 a month on property management.
On 10%.
On 10%. Okay? So, you know, it's not a bad deal. It's a good stream of income. And it will take you, you know, probably an hour a day, but will allow you to have 8 or 9 hours for their stuff. Yeah. So again, which by the way is different than residential real estate, property management, completely different game. But it's something that you need to consider if you're going to be doing commercial, because the mix of all of these things is what will bring your income significantly higher. Now, in addition to the property management that you charge, you need to be sure that you set up on your agreement that you will charge still the 5 or 6% for the lease of the facility that you manage, because you are property manager and leasing agent.
You charge that to the
Every time I rent a space,
tenant.
they are on no.
They pay you for bringing the tenant.
Well, the landlord pays me out of that tenant lease that I negotiate. So every time I lease a space on that shopping center, I get 6%, which I share if somebody brought the client to me 3 and 3. But if it's my client and I have signed so lower, it's 6% for me. Okay? Now,
Do you put in your average lease like you already answered that, I see the 3%.
yeah. I add a 3% renewal clause on the leases. That means that usually you get, with the exception of the supermarket and some of the large stores, for example, Family Tree, I did a 20-year lease. But for all of the other spaces, I put a 3% clause on renewals. So if I renew, I collect the 3% and I don't have to share with anybody.
On the lease fee, do you have to share that 5 or 6% with the cooperating?
If the client is brought to me by a real estate, then it doesn't have to be 3%. I tell them what I am going to share.
And that fee usually comes from the first month's rent and security deposit?
It comes from the landlord.
Okay.
Whether they collect it on the first month and deposit, which usually is what happens, fine. But sometimes they give, for example, when I did the fit store, part of the agreement was that they will start to pay 3 months after they move in, because we didn't know how it was gonna work and so on. So it was part of the deal. Well, the owner came out of pocket and paid me the commission that was allowed, because you earn your commission at the agreement of the mines, and then you collect at closing. So when they sign up the lease, boom, that's
So
where
you
you
brought
collect.
that feeding people.
Yes, that was my client.
I just did one that they gave me 4% I was representing the tenant, so that means it was an 8% commission, you think?
Yes.
It was an 8%. Is that normal?
In leases, you see all kind of fees, and it depends a lot on the type of property that you are leasing, how complex it is to lease it. Do you all understand that question? He was paid 4% on a lease that he brought the client to the leasing agent. And the reason for that is, he said that is if it's normal to get 4%. He said, no, it's normal to get different amounts, because it will depend on whether the space that you are renting is difficult to rent, whether it has peculiarities, whether it has issues that you need to, that will require certain type of client to only to be able to fill it up. A typical example of that is the airports. Okay, I did a lease on the San Juan airport before it became a private airport. about 4 or 5 years ago for a client here in Florida, and the commission was 10% on the lease,
For the life of that lease,
for the life of that lease.
because that's a huge difference.
And it was a 6-year lease with a 6-year option. And the reason was that it was a very, first of all, it was a very tight spot. It was on an area that has not a lot of traffic, or at that point in time didn't have a lot of traffic. 6 months later, JetBlue came in and they changed the whole thing, and then this was right in the middle of the whole
Wow.
thing. So, but the thing is that the peculiarities of the condition of the space and the conditions of the market of that space will determine the amount of rent
Right.
that they will be able to
Commission.
collect and the commission that you will collect on that.
So when they give you another option for 6 years, they have to use you or pay you?
No, on that case, they didn't have to. And not all the time you get the lease renewal fees. Mostly, when they are properties that you manage, you can get the lease renewal fees. On most of the leases, the landlords will not give you the renewal. However, something that I do on the process is every time I get somebody into a lease, I put on my schedule regular visits, at least 2 a year. And a year before the lease end, I usually go in and make an appointment with them and tell them, well, are you happy and satisfied with this space? Do I need to help you renegotiate this lease, or do I need to change you to another location?
And you're
So
acting
you
as
give
the
the,
lease.
you give the client.
And then at that point in time, if they say, no, I like this location, but I think that you need to
Negotiate.
negotiate the lease, then I go back to them and say, listen, your tenant, which is my client, is interested in renewing, but under these circumstances. And then
So Jeremy can go back, let's say,
Yeah.
5 years later,
if you
and get
keep on,
paid, and actually
Yeah.
the landlord
Yes.
can
yes,
give
you
compensation for
push
whatever
it.
year.
if you wait for it to
But
happen.
it's not gonna happen.
And
I'm
you
not a
know-
realtor at that time.
You know how I learned that?
Losing them.
You remember the guy that I mentioned earlier, Cesar Ramirez, the owner of many of the Bravo supermarkets? He called me and said, Rafi, I need a supermarket in the Orange City area. And I said, got it, I have a space for you. Brought him in, he loved it. Was an old Winn-Dixie that just closed a couple of months ago at that point in time. So we went in, we negotiated the lease, they moved in, we're fine. And I did what I used to do. I kept sending them emails and at that point in time mail, follow-ups and so on, but I didn't follow up on the property. 6.5 months later, he turned around and go directly to the owner of the plaza and bought the plaza for $16 million. You know how much the commission should have been?
Wow.
Another reason to use the right contracts. Now I don't sign a contract of rental that I don't include a clause that says if this property is sold to this client
My
over the
commission.
period of time that this lease is active,
My commission is.
I am the representing broker for that commissioner.
But only in the
Because that really hurts because
Broker.
that really hurts because he
16
personally,
million.
yeah, I have get him a lot of properties, and he went around me and did it with all good intentions.
You think so?
Oh, believe me, I know him very well. After that, I rent him another 2 properties, and he will do it on a blink of an eye again. There are people that do business right, and then there are people that are in business to screw everybody they can. And
But it was only in the time of the period of the lease term.
yeah,
Yes.
there is so much that you can do. you know?
Right, but say it's a 5-year lease, if they buy it at 5 years and 1 day, they're not.
Yeah,
which is-
there are ways for them
Yeah.
to not have to, but
At
what
least
you
in the
need to do
lease
is to
time.
protect, because it was really harmful to my mind
No, I can imagine.
to see the property change from one owner to them for $16 million.
You lost 1.6 million?
And I were the only
500,000.
procuring cost of the transaction
Yeah.
and not collecting a
So
commission.
you think the reason he did it is to negotiate the price, not to pay your commission?
Yeah, because I could have get
A heck of a deal.
that plaza for better pricing than what he did, and better conditions and better financing, but he thought that he was smarter than that.
People are so stupid.
So, okay. So
So-
he bought it
So he-
before the term was over.
But he bought it
6
6
months
and a half
after.
months after we
Oh.
signed the contract. That's what I tell you, that it was painful.
He did it purposely.
But it was my fault.
But he did it purposely. So now, in our contract, so then every contract should be done by a lawyer, 1, or 2, like the one that you use for this type of people is
But
not
they
commercial.
make it though. The listing agent is the one that produces the contract with the attorney, right?
Well, on my deals,
Uh-huh.
no.
What did you
make the
do?
lease agreement?
I have all my clients produce a contract by a lawyer. I just did 2 this afternoon.
That's what I was
Send
gonna
it
tell you,
in.
because we use the regular one.
Yeah, no,
that does not say-
I don't use.
No, we don't use the regular one. The listing agent usually produces it, but I guess you.
For example, we use on a deal that Edwin and I are doing, we did a vacant land standard contract, but it's because we're buying a lot for $95,000. There's no sense of doing anything different.
Yeah, but this that you told me.
But for anything over that, I mean anything of value, I'll do my own contracts with the lawyer, and I have templates that are very complete, but then I go in and for each one of the cases I tailor it to whatever needs we have. For example, on anything that I do with this guy, the one from the supermarket, I include a lot of clauses that I don't necessarily include in other contracts because I already have a
In those
Do
contracts.
you get any pushback from the listing agent that's doing the lease?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we want to use our lease.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, then sell it to somebody else. And then immediately you say, okay, well, let us check your contract, because remember, you are
okay.
bringing the client.
Yeah.
So, same thing, they usually said, no, we are the seller, we select the closing agent. No. We will select the closing agent, you can decide whether you want to pay for the policy or not, and if you don't pay, we pay for it, but we will use our closing agent. That way, the $500,000 or $200,000 that is on escrow deposit is on somebody that I trust and that will look for us.
Exactly.
This is on purchases, not on leases, right?
On both.
On both.
Rafi,
Yeah.
all of that things that you are saying has to be in a contract?
Yes.
So then,
Oh, no.
If it's not written, it's not there.
so on that particular client of yours, no, we should have done our only, just in case, and 6 months later she was
And let me
buying a
explain
plaza.
that. Let me explain that because this is important. It's not that you do your own lease. I don't do the leases, and I have been doing this for 32 years. I use a lawyer,
Of course,
a
yeah.
real estate lawyer,
Okay.
because there are lawyers and then there are lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? I use a real estate lawyer that do real estate for a living,
They have the
okay,
experience.
and that knows what they are doing. And for example, next week on Thursday, I'm spending 6 hours on a law firm, on a training session on what is happening with new commercial contracts. I go to that class every 6 months. And you will be amazed on how many things I find out every 6 months that are coming out new.
Especially the clause area.
Yeah, because things are changing so much fast at this point in time that you need to be sure that these things that you are, for example, let me tell you, last 6 months ago, we spent the 4.5 hours talking about medical marijuana. because of the complexities of the leases that you need to do for medical marijuana. Well, you know what happens? I was able to do a lease on medical marijuana, international grain. And the only reason why I was able to do it is because when they went out to do the thing, I find out about it, noticed that they were doing some things that they should not do, and I called the guy and said, listen, are you aware of this and this and this? He said, no, who tell you that? And I said, well, that's, your agent should be telling you this. Well, they resigned the other agent and came to me.
And those are lawyers that just give classes, like
That's,
continuing
no,
education.
that is the College of Attorneys in Florida have a division, an education division where they train lawyers. But if you are interested in the subject, you can get into those classes. You have to pay for it. I pay $600 for this one.
That's it.
But it gets you there with the people that will be able to answer those questions to you. And the other thing is that I have found out, for example, if you have a client that will be doing a medical marijuana dispensing unit or production shop, I have the lawyer for you. Is the correct person, is the one that have done all of them in Florida. So, you know, who else you go to? That's the right person to do. So it's important to be, it's not to do your own leases, it's to be sure that you use the right people to do the leases.
In the area.
And finally, there is what they call the maintenance overhead fees. Okay? If you need to fix a toilet, you don't charge anything. That's part of your maintenance program. But if you need to do a complete overhaul of the building, of the plaza, the face of the building, the parking lot, you will get a 15% fee for everything that is part of the contract. So again, see all of the places where you collect money when you do commercial.
So if there's a renovation, you're in charge of getting the renovation, but then who pays the fee?
The landlord pays the fee.
For you organizing the whole renovation?
Yeah.
But, okay, so renovation's 20,000, they're gonna pay you 15% of the 20,000?
If it's a renovation that is not common to the contract. For example, if Edwin comes in and said, I want to put a church on this space, and it will cost $25,000 to fix it, I don't get any money on that unless I serve as the general contractor for Edwin.
Of course.
But for the sake of the plaza, but if it's a renovation of the whole plaza, I get the fee.
Just for organizing the renovation?
Just
But then you need to
organizing
find
and
the
managing the
contractor.
renovation.
But then you need to
So
find
if
contractor.
Yeah, use the contractors and if the contractors, and I have a bill there that I can show you, but if the contractors, for example, I have one that have 5 different contractors, came up to about $100,000, I got $15,000 on that.
Yeah, because you're putting everybody together.
Correct. And I
But
supervise
then-
the work.
But
So
then you have to
just part of the
supervise,
cost.
yeah.
Correct.
It's part of the cost.
It's not like you're just gonna get 15% just to.
No.
Yeah,
I put it
You have to
together,
work
I
it.
supervise, I do the schedules, everything else.
that was what, 2-3 weeks of work? 4 weeks?
2.5 months.
2.5 months.
And make sure there's no liens afterwards.
Correct. And then eviction fees. These are pre-negotiated. Okay? In Florida, doing a residential eviction
It's totally different.
is harder than doing a commercial eviction. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
So, but the issue with the commercial eviction is that they are different in nature. It's not as simple as doing the paperwork that you do with the residential eviction. You know, you do the 3-day notice, you do the 20-day notice, you do the eviction with the marshal and so on. On commercial real estate, you have to do certain things in certain ways. So what I do is, I usually put in my contracts, depending the client, an eviction fee of $600 or $700 if an eviction is needed. I have to tell you, I don't do too many evictions because I do a lot of good screening of the clients before they go in. So it's important to get them
Got it.
really. Now, to finish up, and I'll be finishing in 3 minutes. I know that you have to leave. Property management software. You have to be sure that if you will do property management and it's more than 1 or 2 spaces, you use a property management software.
Software.
It's easier,
Which
it's more
one you
convenient. Well, we have, there are about 10 or 12 options on the market right now. I will talk to you about 3 of them.
Portfolio, yeah.
Building, Appfolio, and property ware. If you are doing commercial only, go to Appfolio. It's the most powerful commercial application. If you cannot, and the good thing about Appfolio is that the fees are based on the amount of clients that you have. So if you have 1 or 2 clients, you will be paying lower fees than if you have 70 clients, which is nice. Buildium is good, but it's a little bit more complicated, and the fees are high whether you have slow amount of clients or low amount of clients. What they do have is an excellent technical support in place. And then property where is good, but it's not as complete, and the reports are not as easy to understand as, for example, Appfolio, which has fantastic reports. And reports is what it's all about. Well, what it's all about for the client. For you is how easy it is to manage them. But for the client, it's all about reports. If you give them good amount of reports, they will feel comfortable about the process and make it easy. Questions?
The Appfolio, we use it for residential currently right now. Is it a different?
And you know that is exactly the same application. It's just that they have tabs for commercial.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it gives you a lot more detailed reports and by the way, the fee schedule is very similar.
They don't add, and they don't include contracts or
No.
no. So you have to have
Because
the
of the
lawyer.
legal liabilities.
Oh, okay. So you have to have
Yeah.
the lawyer,
Yeah.
no matter
Of
what,
course.
to be covered.
Yeah. Okay?
Awesome.
Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks. We are getting very close to get back to you on the territories.
Good.
Very much interesting information, the one that you have sent. We'll have very interesting.
I haven't sent mine
We're
yet.
supposed to send it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're supposed
a
to
long
send.
time, we're late.
Judy and Janita send theirs, and they have sent theirs.
Okay, I'll send you.
And you send some. You do have to send me.
Yeah, I thought we were going over in class, that's
Yeah.
what we did.
No, I want you
No,
to
he
do the.
has to because he has to do the studies.
Yeah, I want you
Okay.
to look at them, because that way I will know what your interpretation of the process is. That way I can help you more with the selection later.
Interpretation.
Que Anthony Roy ni Anthony Roy, no se perdió,
You would have so many questions.
En 2 semanas le fregaremos el vellón.
Yes.
Dile lo que te perdiste.
I-